And people are asking for something simple, something different. Give it to them. They're not asking for anything hard.
Here's the problem. The Democrats will never put someone up who would change the status quo. I at least admire the Republicans because on their side, they did not want Donald Trump to be their nominee in 2016, but they let the process play out. And guess what? Donald Trump won fair and square. They didn't put the thumb on the scale. They gave Republican voters a choice and they chose Donald Trump. And I respect that. And that's their decision. And that's who they think should lead the country.
Quoting now, mark my words, Carvel said, Joe Biden is going to be out of the 2024 presidential race, whether he's ready to admit it or not. James, do you stand still by what you said, or do you think President Biden has survived this crisis?
Well, I mean, you know, Cook moved 6 states away from Democrats. I watch some of these press conferences. It reminds me of a book they made me read in college called Ship of Fools, a bunch of desperate people sailing into disaster. And, you know, I just think that cowards have never beat criminals in a war yet. And the way that you beat criminals is not to be cowards, is to take it directly home. There's nothing that I see that remotely changes my mind or changes what I think about where we are.
So far, the Biden administration has held fast and said, we are going to be the Democratic nominee. And they keep touting like, hey, we won the primary, even though we shut down certain primaries that we didn't like. Joe Biden got millions of votes saying that he should be the Democratic nominee for president. Also, keep in mind, this is before the debate, after we saw that disaster and became a national headline for the last week. And even Dean Phillips, who's a congressman who ran in that primary, said back in 2016, hey, Bernie, you're just a whiner, sour grapes. And then he got a taste of it firsthand and he was like, wait, they just shut down the primary in Florida? This is literally stuff Iran does and just says, hey, we're going to declare the other person the winner. So for the Democrats in charge of the Democratic Party being like, well, Joe Biden got all these votes during the primary, that wasn't a real primary. They literally had a media blackout on Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips and didn't hold debates. Are you really shocked that Joe Biden won? And the people who just vote Democrat no matter what, just showing up and being like, yeah, I guess I'll vote for Joe Biden. I haven't heard of any of these other people. I just let the mainstream media tell me lies all the time, and I guess just I'll go with Joe.
But do you believe what you said, though, is different than what you said in that you said he's going to drop out. What you're saying is you seem now resigned to or upset about that basically they have capitulated.
No, I don't. And I think like Senator Patty Murray, who has been in the Senate for over 30 years, and the fact that she came out and said this speaks volumes as opposed to what people say in front of a camera. So I still think I'll stand by my thing that he won't run, but if he does, we're just making a idiotic choice for the future of our country. And I can't help but believe that. And the proof's in the pudding. They're moving states away from us. We're losing. We're not winning. And when we lose, America loses. It's that simple.
I think the Democrats in charge need to realize we're in desperate times, and they call for desperate measures. We've never had a president who's obviously going through cognitive issues during a presidency when we live in the media age where people can have a camera at any point and we can physically see him deteriorating. But we have hardliners in the Democratic Party who just want to stick their head in the sand, just be like, we could beat Trump. We promise, even though we have a 36% approval rating for the president. But that's the problem. We have people hanging on to power who will not let it go no matter what unless they're literally forced to leave.
Critics will say, but what happens a month from now or 2 months from now if there's a huge, if there's another debate-like performance?
So you get through one teleprompter performance. What are you going to do on September 10th when there's another debate scheduled? What are you going to do? He couldn't meet with the German chancellor because he had to go to bed when he was at the NATO conference. Anderson, I just think, you're right. Is there a risk in trying to change directions? Of course, there's risk with everything. With risk comes hope. And right now, we have always been a party of hope. Hope and a place called hope and deal a leader in hope. And I have a dream and keep hope alive. And I don't see any hope in the Democratic Party right now. I see a lot of fear and a lot of, if we try something different, we end up in a ditch. Well, we're already in a ditch. We ought to try to get out of it as opposed to trying to drive it. I agree with everything that everybody says. I think we got to have a change. I just genuinely do.
Okay, let's remember this. President Obama ran on this idea of hope. He just continued the status quo. He was very similar to George Bush, at least when it came to executive power and taking executive action, which George Bush would never have dreamed of. But it's nice to see James Carville at least acknowledging, saying like, hey, Joe Biden, we're already in a ditch, brother. I don't know how we're going to be able to pull ourselves out of this without replacing Joe Biden. Apparently someone with neurodegenerative symptoms is somehow going to defeat the great orange man. And it's been very interesting because the Republicans haven't been running ads because they're in the dark too, because they don't know if Joe Biden's going to continue to be the candidate. So we're just going to have to see what happens during the convention. Are they actually going to pull a fast one and be like, hey, the delegates aren't actually pledged to Joe Biden? The most convenient thing to do that is to hand money over to Kamala Harris, but Kamala Harris is very unpopular and tried to put people in jail for truancy. And I do not think the Democrats want to put her up because they know she very likely would lose to Trump. Who I think they should put up, I think they should put up Gavin Newsom. Yes, California's a disaster. Yes, Gavin Newsom's corrupt as shit, but he's a good talker. And he can continue to sell this bullshit message of hope and change, even though it would just be the status quo, and whatever Joe Biden's doing now, Gavin Newsom will probably just be doing if he became president.
If there is not a true heartfelt enthusiasm for a candidate, and it's just, I'm fearful of this other candidate, does that lead to a lot of people staying on the couch or just kind of thinking, well, why am I going to get a babysitter this day to go vote?
There is an anti-MAGA majority in this country. But I saw Senate polls today. I saw polls in Wisconsin where Tammy Baldwin's up 5 and Trump is down 6. I see the same thing in Nevada. I see the same thing in Arizona, Montana, Pennsylvania, Ohio. I think people want to vote Democratic. They want to vote a change. They're asking for a simple thing. Let's give them change. If we give them change, and we give them something for us, we'll get 54%. We'll keep a Senate majority. We'll win the House back. But we're trying to talk people out of doing something that they want. We're trying to talk people that you really don't want change, and they really do. And if we might win anyway, because maybe, if you look at France or you look at Britain, but that's a big risk we take, and people are asking for something simple, something different. Give it to them. They're not asking for anything hard.
Here's the problem. The Democrats will never put someone up who would change the status quo. I at least admire the Republicans because on their side, they did not want Donald Trump to be their nominee in 2016, but they let the process play out. And guess what? Donald Trump won fair and square. They didn't put the thumb on the scale. They gave Republican voters a choice, and they chose Donald Trump. Similar how we just had a Republican primary. You had Chris Christie up there, you had Nikki Haley, you had Ron DeSantis, and all these different candidates they could have selected from, and they chose Donald Trump. And I respect that, and that's their decision, and that's who they think should lead the country. But the Democrats will play these games and do everything with sleight of hand to be like, hey, we had a legitimate primary process. Joe Biden won. Oh, okay. You want to say Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson actually got a legitimate shot, which is just blatantly untrue.
James, I just want to ask you one last question, which is, I'm wondering, what do you say to Democrats who I'm hearing from, and I'm sure you are, I don't know if you check your, messages, but I'm sure you are hearing from, who say, how dare you are even talking about this, because you should be talking about how bad Trump is, and you should not be doing something that weakens Biden. Obviously, in my case, I believe it's my job as a journalist to talk about what is true and what's not true and what we are all seeing, and not be taking, it's not my job to be supporting a particular candidate. What do you say, though, to Democrats about what you are saying? I'm sure you hear this.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I thought about this for a long time. I'm very comfortable with where I am. I'm very comfortable with what I'm saying. And I understand that many people who are friends of mine are not very pleased with me and think I should just fall in line. And I've tried everything I could to do that, and I just cannot get there. And I'm not very likely to get there. But trust me, Anderson, trust me, Jamal, I've thought about this and agonized over it. And I don't know, prayed over it, but I think that the country wants a change. And I think the Democratic Party from 1932 to 2022 is the greatest political party in Western democracy. And I've always been very proud to be a member of it. But when people demand and change, as they have numerous times in our history, we give them what they've demanded. We've given them change. Look, let's give it to them again.
Okay, I'm not going to completely discount James Carville because he is very brave to actually break conventional thinking and just not blindly supporting Joe Biden. So I support him in the sense at least he's coming out and saying we need to have a change. But the Democratic Party has no interest in giving you change in the modern era. If they do replace Joe Biden, it's going to be a standard Democrat. So you're just voting more or less for the status quo. And I'll just leave you with this if you want Joe Biden to continue on in this race. I feel that you can't really vote for Joe Biden unless you're okay with elder abuse, because Joe Biden has dedicated his life to public service, and he is obviously deteriorating. Father Time is undefeated. If you're going to vote for Joe Biden, as I've said jokingly many times, you have no standards. They could run a dead person who's Democrat, and you would vote for them anyways, because you hate the other candidate, the great orange man, Donald Trump, and yet you keep telling us the Republicans are the hateful ones. They hate immigrants. They hate the other. They're the ones who are the hateful ones. Careful not to become the thing you hate.